What's up? We are an hour late. I slept in. I wish I slept in well, but my body is sore. But here we are. We're here with the Monday stream. We're going to be in Acts chapter 14. We're home. No more beautiful background of mountaintop view if you're watching this. No more mountaintop view of a giant lake. Well, not a giant lake, but rather large lake. We're back to our living room, but that's okay because home is where the heart is, or something like that. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Like I said, we're going to be in Acts chapter 14. So let's go. All right. Acts chapter 14, this is coming from the New Living Translation. And it reads, "The same thing happened in Iconium. Paul and Barnabas went to the Jewish synagogues and preached with such power that a great number of both Jews and Greeks became believers. Some of the Jews, however, spurred God's message and poisoned the minds of the Gentiles against Paul and Barnabas. But the apostles stayed there a long time, preaching boldly about the grace of the Lord, and the Lord proved their message was true by giving them power to do miraculous signs and wonders. But the people of the town were divided in their opinion about them. Some sided with the Jews and some with the apostles. Then a mob of Gentiles and Jews, along with their leaders, decided to attack and stone them. When the apostles learned of it, they fled to the region of Lycaonia, to the towns of Lystra and Derbe and the surrounding area. And there they preached the good news. While they were at Lystra, Paul and Barnabas came upon a man with crippled feet. He had been that way from birth, so he had never walked. He was sitting and listening to as Paul preached. Looking straight at him, Paul realized he had faith to be healed. So Paul called to him in a loud voice, 'Stand up,' and the man jumped to his feet and started walking. When the crowd saw what Paul had done, they shouted in their local dialect, 'These men are gods in human form.' They decided that Barnabas was the Greek god Zeus, and that Paul was Hermes, since he was the chief speaker. Now the temple of Zeus was located just outside the town. So the priests of the temple and the crowd brought bulls and wreaths of flowers to the town gates, and they prepared to offer sacrifices to the apostles. But when the apostles Barnabas and Paul heard what was happening, they tore their clothing in dismay and ran out among the people shouting, 'Friends, why are you doing this? We are merely human beings just like you. We have come to bring you the good news that you should turn from these worthless things and turn to the living God who made heaven and earth, the sea, and everything in them. In the past, he permitted all the nations to go their own ways, but he never left them without evidence and of himself and his goodness. For instance, he sends you rain and good crops and gives you food and joyful hearts.' But even with these words, Paul and Barnabas could scarcely restrain the people from sacrificing to them. Then some Jews arrived from Antioch and Iconium and won the crowds to their side. They stoned Paul and dragged him out of town, thinking he was dead. But as the believers gathered around him, he got up and went back into the town. The next day he left with Barnabas for Derbe. After preaching the good news in Derbe and making many disciples, Paul and Barnabas returned to Lystra, Iconium, and Antioch of Pisidia, where they strengthened the believers. They encouraged them to continue in the faith, reminding them that we must suffer many hardships to enter the kingdom of God. Paul and Barnabas also appointed elders in every church with prayer and fasting. They turned the elders over to the care of the Lord, in whom they had put their trust. Then they traveled back through Pisidia to Pamphylia. They preached the word in Perga, then went down to Attalia. Finally, they returned by ship to Antioch of Syria, where their journey had begun. The believers there had entrusted them to the grace of God to do the work they had now completed. Upon arriving in Antioch, they called the church together and reported everything God had done through them, and how he had opened the door of faith to the Gentiles too. And they stayed there with the believers for a long time. And that is Acts chapter 14. There were, I think, two things I saw as I pull these back up. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Number 1. Verse 1, the same thing happened in Iconium. Paul and Barnabas went to the Jewish synagogue and preached with such great power that a great number of both Jews and Greeks became believers. So when it says the same thing happened, if we were to go back to chapter 13, or if you listened, that'd be preferably. We don't have to. But if you go back to Acts chapter 13, where it talks about Paul's first missionary journey, and they went to all these different places. When he gets to verse 16 in chapter 13, Paul stood, lifted his hand to quiet them, started speaking. Men of Israel, gives the Jewish people all these things there. Some of the Gentiles loved it. Some of the Jews loved it. But most of them hated it. And they tried to kill them and all those things. And that was in verse somewhere. Maybe verse 46. Yeah, verse 50. Then Jews stirred up influential religious women, leaders of the city, and they incited a mob against Paul and Barnabas and ran them out of town. So that's what happened there in Acts chapter 13. And then in Acts chapter 14, it starts off. The same thing happened in this place. So when you go to these places and you upset one group of people saying, hey, you're wrong, here's the answer. And they say it more graciously than that probably. But they say, hey, you're wrong, I'm right. Here's what you need to do. Here's what the truth is. Some people will get mad and they will try to stone you and run you out of town. And if you do that more than enough times, over and over and over, you'll realize that some people will like the message you're given. Some people will see maybe there's freedom in the message. And then some people won't like it. And then some people really won't like it. And they'll try to start a mob against you and try to stone you and all those things. And so that was basically the history of Acts chapter 14 and 13. And if I was a betting man, we'll probably see it again, maybe in 15 or 16. I don't know. The other thing I saw, and I highlighted it, because when I was reading this last night, I forgot to highlight it last night. When I was reading this last night to go over it, I saw it, and it was just really, really interesting. But so when they were at the one place, this pops up in verse, let me pull this back up for y'all. Pops up back in verse 13. Now, the temple of Zeus was located just outside the town. So the priests of the temple and the crowd brought bulls and wreaths of flowers to the town, and they prepared to offer sacrifices to the apostles. They were going to give blessings, praise, honor, glory, and worship to the disciples or to the apostles because of what they could do. And they thought they were gods because for this particular town and this culture, they had the temple of Zeus and Hermes, like right next door. Let's just call it like it's a block away if you're Americanizing it. And so when I'm reading this and I'm thinking back, well, how would I have read this had I been like a new Jesus follower? Like, how would I have read this? How would 8th grade Matt had read this? And 8th grade Matt would have read this like, wait, what? This is weird because of the Zeus and Hermes. Because I grew up in high school learning about Greek gods and goddesses and the myths and that and Hercules and all these things, right? And scripturally, this is here, like in it, like it's real. Like it wasn't real to me. It's real to these people who are listening to the Apostle Paul and Barnabas and hearing what they're saying. And so it was just fascinating. And like there's no application here, but it's just fascinating to me that this, like for lack of a better word, like the crossover in this, like it's neat to see that the Greek gods and goddesses of Zeus and Hermes and Hercules, like it's more than just a myth. Like it's real to people. And it's cool to see that Paul in that time used it because it was real to them, used it to point to something even more real. And you saw, and he says this and he's like, hey, like first off, verse 15, he says, friends, why are you doing this? We're merely human beings just like you. We're not gods, nothing like that. We are merely human beings. And he's saying that there is, like, the God that you worship, that you give sacrifices to, like that God is a real God who is true, who wants to give you the same power that gives us. And he's saying, we have come to bring you the good news that you should turn from the worthless things, Zeus, Hermes, other Greek gods and goddesses, turn from those worthless things and turn to the living God who made heaven and earth, the sea, and everything in them. In the past, this true and living God permitted these things because obviously Jesus had not come yet Jesus had not come yet in human form to live out all the prophecies and be the sacrifice on the cross and resurrect. So those things hadn't happened. So in the past, he allowed these things, but now no longer. Like there's now a reason for it all. In the past, he permitted all the nations to go their own ways, but he never left them without evidence of himself and his goodness. So if there was something you were looking for, look for the evidence. That's a hard segue into the, but it is what it is. Look for the evidence of himself and his goodness. And in a practical way, what I like to do, and I'm about to do it in a second, but I'll get my notebook of figuring out everything I got to do for the day. And I got to say, like, I write down three little chickas. And I say, God, like, reveal to me, what am I thankful for? Like, help me, because sometimes it's real easy. And then other days it's like pretty difficult to figure out what am I thankful for? I'm just like, bring, like, cause I don't really want it to be like there's been times like I'll write coffee. I'm thankful for coffee, right? But I would like my gratitude, the things that I write, to be a little bit more thoughtful than just saying like, oh yeah, coffee, water, pillow, right? Which I am eternally grateful for. Absolutely. I'm grateful for clean water. I'm grateful for coffee. I'm grateful for comfortable pillows because some people don't have clean water. Some people hate coffee. Some people don't have the comfort of a pillow. I'm grateful for those things. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I want it to come more from my heart to be grateful for the things in my life that ultimately matter. That probably comes out wrong, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. I want to be grateful for the things that, everything matters. We'll just leave it at that. Let's just leave it at that. But that's it. Go write down 3 things you're grateful. Love you. We'll see you on Wednesday.